For example, petroleum products. They are to be transported, produced at one place, and they are to be transported across the country. Now, such companies have to be paid an equalized transport so that the end price to be paid by the consumer remains same throughout the country. So, for that purpose, there is a need to have a standard that how the transportation cost can be equalized, how the freight cost can be equalized. What is the method to be adopted in this standard? After announcing this standard, there was a gap in the further approach to be followed. The institute had a rethought. They followed the International Federation of Accountants, International Accounting Standard framework. They wanted to follow that framework. Sometime in 2007, the entire Cost Accounting Standard Board was restructured. A wider participation among all the stakeholders, to name a few, the professional members from the same institute, professional members from the other Institute of Chartered Accountants of India or Institute of Company Secretaries of India, the representatives of the various users and the regulatory bodies in the Government of India, the representatives from various industry associations, the representatives from various academic bodies and B schools, and various practicing professionals, eminent people, all they were put into the Cost Accounting Standard Board. That board decided to follow and revise the entire framework of issuing the Cost Accounting Standard exactly in tune with the standards issued internationally by the International Accounting Standard Board. What did this board say? They followed a uniform approach, the structured approach, and that revised framework had a fixed framework to be followed for all standards. I'll just quickly give you the structure of that framework. It has a first component of introduction, second component of objective of that standard, the scope of that standard, then definitions of various items to be used for the purpose of understanding that standard, then followed by the principles of measurement, followed by the assignment of costs and revenues, then presentation, and the last one is the disclosure, that how the information and the cost statements are to be disclosed in various formats. Now, this was the standard structure modified from the Accounting Standard Board issued followed by the International Federation of Accountants. With this framework and the restructured accounting standard, Cost Accounting Standard Board, the board took this exercise rather more seriously, and from 2008 till today, they issued 9 more standards. Now, there was a stimulus to take this step at a faster pace. Sometime in 2008, January, the Government of India had set up a committee to re-examine the entire framework and mechanism of cost accounting and cost audit in the country. That group took a year to study the entire framework. By the end of the year, they gave a report. In that, the group took a very strongly recommended that there is a need for a structured principles to be announced by a professional body like Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and there is a need to issue the cost accounting standards as well as the generally accepted cost accounting principles and practices. Now, this was the trigger point. Therefore, the approach followed since then was to have a structured approach and a faster approach to issue the standards. The institute and the board identified 39 areas for issue of standards. 21 areas were for the various elements of cost, for example, the raw material cost, the employees cost, packing material cost, direct expenses, like this. There are various elements of cost, and the balance 18 areas for the application of cost areas. So this was the approach followed, and first priority was given to issue the standards on various elements of cost. By this process, as I already told you, 9 more standards have already been issued. 10th standard on depreciation and amortization is under discussion stage, And very soon after maybe in a month or so, that standard can also be announced. Meanwhile, the board took up the exercise to revise the existing 5 standards as per the newly adopted framework. As a result of that, the CS2 and the CS3 on capacity determination and overhead has been revised, and the new standard has already been announced. There are a few important elements of cost for which the standards are yet to be issued. For example, on the selling and distribution overheads, or the interest and financing cost, or the joint and byproduct cost and all that. There are a few elements of cost where there is a need to have quick standards, but Institute and the Standard Board is working very fast to have the standards issued on various elements of cost. Now, gentlemen, there is a need to because these standards are new to the country, new to the profession, new to the industry. It takes time to understand the standards. When it takes a lot of time to develop the standards, it takes equally more time to understand that. The Institute is really taking the job ahead of it. They are issuing a guidance note for each standard. Now, this is helping the members with practical examples, practical case studies. Different type of industries cases are picked up in the guidance note to understand the various professionals and the industry people, the implication of each standard, and how to really implement the various principles enunciated in that standard. Already 3 or more guidance notes have already been issued, and rest of are in the various stages of development. This approach has helped the profession as well as the industry to follow a structured principle-based cost statement. Now, there was a need to recognize these standards. Until there is a statutory force behind it, many of those standards may not have been adopted by the various industries. Therefore, the Government of India, in its new rules which were announced in the 2011, have made it mandatory for all companies to necessarily draw their cost statements based on the cost accounting standards and the generally accepted cost accounting principles issued by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. This is a very, very significant and positive development. The first time in the country, the cost accounting standards have been made mandatory application for all industries to be followed. This, the government is very conscious about this. Government is fairly have gone through this concept and is of the opinion that this will help not only the industries to draw the statements on the same set of principles, this will also help the various government agencies and the regulatory bodies to have the same set of data for a better policy decision making. Now, this is what is really the approach which forced the government to adopt necessarily the cost accounting standards and the generally accepted cost accounting principles for various industries in India. I'll give you a brief about the generally accepted cost accounting principles. Now, gentlemen, why do we need to issue a document called generally accepted cost accounting principles? As I told you that in the list of standards, so far the Institute has not been able to cover all elements of cost or all areas of cost or all application areas of cost. Now, until there is a standard, how the industry is going to follow? For example, as I told you, selling and distribution cost, there is no standard issued so far. Now, how the companies are going to follow the principles while assigning or allocating or absorbing the selling and distribution, or even recognizing what is selling and distribution cost? Or in the area of interest and financing charges, is it a cost? The Institute has not yet announced a standard. Now, there are such areas of still conflict where there is a need to have certain principles recognized through a single document until such a time the standards are issued by the Institute